Welcome to another unrehearsed, unscripted Victory Leadership podcast. My name is Earl Airy, and today we'll take a look at servant leadership, what it is, and why it works. Hello again, and welcome. What is servant leadership? Now, up front, I have to confess, I've done podcasts and videos on servant leadership previously. If you take a look in the Victory Leadership playlist, you'll see an in-depth series where we go over each element, each characteristic of servant leadership in a little bit more detail. This is part of a newer series, so I include it here to kind of be all-encompassing of various elements that contributes to what this series is. But just as kind of like a brief overview of servant leadership, we'll take a look at it here and ask the question once again, what is servant leadership? Unlike traditional leadership that emphasizes power and control, servant leadership begins with a desire to serve others first. Developed and popularized by Robert Greenleaf, this approach focuses on developing individuals, fostering community, and cultivating a culture of trust, empathy, and growth. We'll walk through the 10 characteristics identified by Larry Spears that defines a servant leader, each accompanied by a definition and a practical example, and the tangible benefits that they bring to teams and organizations. So whether you're leading in business, ministry, education, or pretty much just about any field, these traits provide a blueprint for leadership that can transform both people and performance. Now, this by no means is exhaustive on servant leadership. There are entire books that have been written about this topic since the inception of it by Robert Greenleaf. And even the concept of servant leadership goes back hundreds and thousands of years. But here is just kind of an introduction that's meant to drive some comments and conversation about the leadership model and the potential use of it in dynamic working environment. So let's hop right on in. Now, here's how we're going to flow for this presentation. We're going to talk about the characteristic, example, and benefit, as I previously mentioned. So the first one is listening, committed to hearing others and understanding their viewpoints and needs. I can say that hearing is just detecting noise, and listening is more of an identification of what that noise is, looking at the details. We can get it as philosophical as we want to. However, the idea is that you're trying to comprehend, and listening is more than just audible. It's not just the sound, also the ways we just communicate as human beings. So we know that when we communicate, it's not just the words. That only represents about 10 to 15%. When we get into it, the tone, inflection, body language, the physical distance, the characteristics of environments that we spend most of our time, like an office place or workplace. Probably walk into an environment and just get an idea of what the person could be about, just by looking at the artifacts that are in the environment. But when we really think about listening from the more traditional sense, what is this person saying? And possibly even listening to what they're not saying. But here the example is that a manager creates space in a team meeting for quiet members to share their ideas without interruption, ensuring every voice is heard. There are some leaders who facilitate over a meeting, and they will ask to, that someone is not really speaking up. They'll zero in on that person and they'll say, hey, Johnny, we haven't heard from you. What's your idea on the topic? Now, of course, there is chances around violating someone's psychological safety by presenting it in that way. However, We're not necessarily getting into those elements in this podcast. We do have another one that is under development that will, but it's just something to consider. So if you want to carry out an example like this, then make certain that the relationship can support it. And by doing so, the benefit is that it can build trust, improve morale, and make people feel like that they've been heard. The second one is empathy, understanding the sharing the feelings of others. An example may be a pastor notices a volunteer is unusually quiet and checks in privately, offering support rather than making assumptions. So, almost similar to listening, empathy is almost like listening in another way. And when there's those times that there may be a little bit of that psychological safety I was mentioning, you may want to engage the person in more of a one-on-one discussion. However, if you can do that in a variety of different venues, the benefit is that it can enhance team loyalty and psychological safety. The team loyalty, individuals coming together to serve a collective function, and leader-member exchange, which is another podcast, suggests or really emphasizes the vertical dyad theory of how people interact with their boss, their manager, leader, supervisor, director, or however they're titled. The elements, of course, of that is that the many see what's going on with the one, and what happens to the one can affect the many. So here, that's a way how even just empathizing with a single individual can have an impact on an entire team. The third characteristic is healing, fostering emotional health and wholeness in the team. Now, these things are not necessarily limited to the team or thinking about it from the team. You can definitely extend these to the individual. They can have a team impact. The example here in this particular characteristic could be that there is a leader who fosters reconciliation between two members after a conflict, helping to restore trust and morale. So there can be two team members that are having a heated discussion, and elements like seniority or feel that they're entitled to, these elements may come up, and through that heated discussion, and again, we do have a podcast under development around those crucial conversations. But in this case, when the leader can bring about the healing, then the benefit is that it can promote the resilience and emotional recovery. Now, several topics around healing. Of course, this here is just between two team members. You can definitely go and find a ton of examples that may kind of dive into other things than just interhuman relationships. It can be things about the financial stability of the organization, competition in the environment, sales and marketing, so much. Many of those are discussed in other podcasts. And if there's things there that you want to hear more in depth, please share in the comments. Get a lot of ideas from people just like you. So the fourth characteristic is awareness, and that's having that self-awareness and situational awareness. So you can just say awareness, and many people might just gravitate to their awareness of the environment. However, it's also awareness internally and externally. So intrinsic and extrinsic. Here, an example may be that a teacher recognizes their own bias in a classroom discussion and adjusts their language to be more inclusive and respectful. So, depending on the venue and the educational environment, you can have topics that are brought up for debate. And one of the exercises or the values of debating is exhaustively going through an empirical exercise to promote the cause or the topic that you're debating about. Well, in some of those cases, people may get emotionally engaged to a high level, almost to the point of, or even to the point of, amygdala hijacking. Again, another topic in a future podcast being developed. Here, in this case, the benefit is that it encourages better decision making and inclusivity when a leader can recognize or be aware of these elements as they're unfolding and shift their presentation, their discussion, the topic, how they're sharing in a way that can help to draw other people in. So that awareness becomes very crucial, very critical. The fifth one is persuasion, and that's convincing others through reasoning, not authority, not just by authority alone. Persuasion, when you hear that, and again, this is almost like a spoiler alert for additional podcasts that are under development, because neuro-linguistic programming suggests or teaches that people can have an emotional connection to a word or phrase. So when people hear something like persuasion, they may have a negative thought around what that is and may deny that it is a viable tool or attribute. It can be used in a positive way. Here we're talking about convincing others. Now, what people a lot of times associate persuasion with is coercion. But with this example, the idea is instead of mandating a new policy, a director shares the rationale behind it and invites feedback to gain genuine buy-in. So perhaps an organization is looking to develop or create a policy. How do those policies get created? Is there any buy-in from the people that this policy will affect? Or does somebody just see a challenge, want to prevent problems in the future, and then addresses the symptom by developing a policy? Well, however that process unfolds, the persuasion of convincing others to be on board with it can manifest itself in many ways. In this case, there was a dialogue that was open to help bring people in. And the benefit is that it can build collaboration and voluntary buy-in. So people are getting engaged to help shape the future because their opinions were asked. And through how that turns out or the outcome, it's still up to, of course, leadership to lead. So through that persuasion, by convincing others, not through coercion, then that can bring about meaningful change. And characteristic number 6 is the conceptualization, and that's seeing beyond the day-to-day operations to envision the bigger picture. There's times when you got to stop and step back from the daily grind and then take a look at what could be, what's possible, and then conceptualize it. With the example here, a nonprofit leader sets long-term goals for community development, inspiring the team with a vision beyond the daily tasks. So at times we just kind of need to change of scenery, whether that's a physical change of scenery, a mental change of scenery, whatever those elements look like that help to contribute to the conceptualization process, because the benefit is it can inspire innovation and long-term planning. Long time ago, Hewlett Packard had a marketing campaign, and it started off with "What if?" So the conversation started off "What if?" and then the voices kind of faded out as the commercial came to an end. So the idea is that we can spawn innovation by carrying on the sentence "What if?" Then we are conceptualizing possibilities for the future. This other characteristic has some connectivity with foresight, and that's anticipating the likely outcome of situations and decisions. So when considering what to do next, what does that look like? Can you paint a visual? Get people excited about elements that could be, and get them engaged on how they may contribute to that. Here we have an example of a youth leader planning programs with generational trends in mind, helping the ministry stay relevant and resilient. This can actually apply to almost any organization where you may have a multi-generational workforce or a multicultural workforce, just engaging what that looks like with the inclusion of others. What are the elements that they may bring to the situation that can provide some insight as to where we can develop and move in a meaningful direction? The benefit here is that it can minimize the risks and enhance organizational preparedness. So we're not saying that this is going to eliminate risks. However, if you got multiple eyes looking at what could be, because as a leader, you proposed where we could go, and then others are excited enough to want to contribute to the growth of that process, then you can minimize the risks on moving forward. And through that, people are going to more likely want to utilize the tools that are going to help them acquire or achieve what it is the goal is successfully, so they're going to be better prepared. So this could be something that is small, it could be something that's big, it can contribute to change management, a lot of directions that having good foresight where it can take you. The 8th characteristic is stewardship, and that's holding organizational resources and people in trust for the greater good. Stewardship, as I have studied it, really looks at agency theory on one side and then altruism on the other. So here, an example could be that there's a department head that responsibly allocates resources, ensuring budget decisions reflect both organizational values and fiscal integrity. Okay, what did all that double talk mean? That's how can that be utilized as an example? Because it's a very broad stroke on what stewardship is. I look at stewardship as the continuum between agency and altruism. Agency suggests that when you're on an airplane, in the event of cabin depressurization, an oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. Place the oxygen mask over your nose and mouth, and many of you have flown will recognize and may be able to recite the rest of that safety speech. The gist of the matter is, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help somebody else. Otherwise, you in that state, you yourself may need help. So help yourself first. Otherwise, you may not have the ability to help someone else. So in those cases, self-care is not selfish. It's preparing you to be able to help others through helping yourself first. At the other end with altruism is that people can go all the way to the point of self-sacrificing, the ultimate self-sacrifice. Where stewardship is somewhere in the middle. What are the ways that we can properly and responsibly manage the resources? And we have more resources available to us than we think. It's not just about money. It's about our time, it's our efforts, it's our mental thought process, our mental health, well-being, all of those elements that come into play when we determine how much of it do we meter out. So the benefit, of course, is one of many, but it helps to create ethical credibility and sustainable practices. So when we are sustainable, we are moving to meet the needs of today without sacrificing the ability for those of tomorrow to do the same. So how do we provide good stewardship of both of those resources? The 9th one is commitment to the growth of others, and that is nurturing the personal and professional development of team members. We have people, we need them to carry out the mission of the organization. We ought to provide them with the resources necessary to be successful at the tasks we are asking them to do. When there are elements in the environment that change, say if we make a move to a particular platform, that may change the way about carrying out what it is we do on a daily basis, or may augment or contribute to that. I want to make certain that we have given them the resources and the knowledge and the know-how to utilize it in an efficient and meaningful way. So for an example, if you bring in another Let's say if somebody says, okay, look, we're tired of spending X amount of dollars on this particular office suite license. We're going to move to this suite that is open source and we can save millions of dollars. Okay, great. Better train the folks. If you're going to ask them to do something, give them the resources necessary that they need to be successful. And when you do that, you can then really create some cohesion. That was an example. Here's another example, let's put the example in the actual slide, where a supervisor mentors an intern, offering learning opportunities that build skills and confidence for their future career. Knowledge is power, and when people are knowledgeable and utilize it in a proper way, then that becomes wisdom. And the benefit is that it can increase the retention and build that leadership pipeline. Because Maya Angelou said, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. So if you're going to provide people with a requirement, give them the tools, help them to grow, and they will want to be sticky because they are more likely to want to pay that forward. Because perceived organizational support modeling tells us that when the perception is that the organization invests into me as a contributing member of the team, then I am more likely to want to pay it forward, reciprocate, pay it back, want to stay with the organization and commit myself to it for as long as possible. There's some thoughts on that? You guessed it, in another podcast. Then the last characteristic is building community, creating a sense of belonging and unity in the workplace. An example may be that there's a church leader who hosts informal gatherings to strengthen relationships, fostering a sense of belonging beyond formal roles. That just means we just get together and we celebrate one another. So in the workplace, that could be a potluck, that could be funny shirt Friday, whatever that is, that helps to people express who they are and what they're about beyond what they're there to do every day. I mean, they're not just accountants, they're people. They're not just engineers, they're people. They're not just managers, they're people. And they all have a story to tell, and there's something that is rich and dynamic about them. When we have the opportunity to embrace that in a place where we're spending more time with one another than we are with our own families at time, it's beneficial to bring and come together as a community. It does that. It really can contribute to strengthening the teamwork and the cultural cohesion within the organization. Talk about a corporate culture. So what does that look like? These are elements that help contribute to that. Let me wrap up this element, this shallow dive into servant leadership. As we see here, it's not just a soft skill. It is a strategic advantage rooted in character awareness and a commitment to the well-being of others. From listening deeply to empathizing with the team members to foster growth and building strong communities, these 10 characteristics work together to shape leaders who inspire trust, unlock potential, and cultivate a lasting influence. The power of servant leadership lies in its simplicity. Serve first, lead second. However, I have to preface that those two are so connected, so symbiotic and intertwined that it's difficult to tell which one comes before the other. But the idea is, if I have a heart to serve, then what can I serve with? And as a leader, you have multiple resources at your disposal. In doing so, you do not diminish your leadership, you deepen it. The true mark of a servant leader is not how many follow them, but how many that they've empowered to lead. So with that, I just want to thank you for your time, your precious time today. I hope you found something here of value. If you did, or if you believe this is something you could pass on to someone else that they may find of value, I would love it if you gave me a like. Go ahead and subscribe if you'd like to get more information, and check out our links below. And again, I just want to thank you for your time. I hope you have a great afternoon, a peaceful evening, and a restful good night.